The Story and the Engine is a new episode by a new writer for the show in Doctor Who Season 2, 2025. Talking about it today will be myself, Neo from Australia, Ingiga from England, Agatha from France. And what's interesting here is the last time we talked was over Dot and Bubble in the last year's season, and the writer of this episode has actually told Radio Times he sees The Story and the Engine as a kind of companion piece to Dot and Bubble, and he's talked very highly of the episode, saying it was gorgeous, beautifully written, so emotional, so emotive in a very understated kind of way, and that understatement is what guided my hand in writing this. So kind of an interesting connection between both episodes here we've talked about. But let's get into The Story and the Engine. What did we all think of it?
To me, it's gonna be really concise and simple. It's one of my favorite Doctor Who stories of all time, everything, every media, every decade, etc. I just find that it's a very poignant story that's really imaginative in a lot of ways, and that is a lot refreshing in that era of First of T. Davies 2, where although it's still to me really efficient, you kinda start to get tired of getting his style and his vision of what Doctor Who should be all of the time. And it's coming back to the first issue since Russell was announced, the fact that he can only go so far without redoing his old tricks. And it's also, to me, is a really good response to Dot and Bubble, because during the last year, what I was saying was that I really liked the episode, but that I feel like it's kinda reaching the limit that Russell as a what writer has if it wants to tackle those matters. And my main point that I had a problem with was the fact that we didn't really see what Ncuti was thinking about this and how it's making him reconsider his whole approach of the world. And thankfully that episode is doing it, and I'm going to speak of that later. It was less concise than I thought, but yeah, basically I really loved that episode and find it kinda vital in that season.
Yeah, like it does pretty much completely respond to, I guess, what was missing in Dot and Bubble, I guess. Because now that an episode like this one exists, where the Doctor is in a world that's surrounded by other black people, and we can kind of hear how he feels. I mean, he directly talks about and addresses his own experience of having a black body for, well, the first time in living memory. Not technically the first time, if Fugitive is counted, but, first time in a long while. And that, I guess it really does, I mean, like you say, last time with Dot and Bubble, it was addressing the racism, but it was from the perspective of, well, he's on his own, surrounded by all of these racist white people. Like, what's the actual alternative to that? Because the tragic point of view where you're just suffering racism all the time isn't the full experience of being black, is it? There are other black people in the world.
Yeah.
Sometimes. So it's nice to get an episode about them. And just those scenes at the start I think, well, to start with, you have a very sweet TARDIS scene, which is rare in this era, actually, where the Doctor and Companion are just talking openly to each other in the TARDIS, where the Doctor opens up about how he feels.
I just wanted to add that, that was precisely what we were speaking of in the Dot and Bubble podcast, the fact that there was no TARDIS scene in that whole season, but now we know that it's in that whole era. But that Dot and Bubble probably was the episode that needed the most one TARDIS scene, and you can even see like the glimmers of one at the end of the episode. Something that like would have 100% happened under the Moffat era, or even the Chibnall era, to be honest. But the Chibnall era would never have managed an episode like that. Anyway.
So it's very sweet and kind of sentimental and just a good addition to his character to hear him open up about how he feels about that, and why this very human thing that he has, where now that he kind of looks this way and he has this skin, he feels like the need to sort of be around other people like that, because for so many of his adventures he's surrounded by white people, or surrounded by aliens. I think it's just a need to sort of be in touch with what he's like now, and how it actually just helps him to be in a community with other people. Because in a way, even though obviously we look at him regenerating into a black man as now he's subject to racism, now he's having all these negative things directed towards him. There is the flip side of that, because now he's also part of a different community that he's not usually part of, right? He is accepted in different places. So there is a positive side to it as well, which is really nice to see.
Yeah.
So that early sequence when he's going through the market in Lagos and he's friends with everyone in the market, you know, he knows all the folks around, you know, they're very warm to him, they welcome him, they know his face. I think it was just really sweet to see, and it was just a really I loved how they realised it, you know, in Wales, in Bad Wolf Studios, recreating Nigeria in there. You know, the amount of effort they put into that, and it looked really good. It was just really energising and joyful to kind of see that.
Yeah, completely. And to me, it was also a kind of callback to some slice of life scenes that we can see with like half of even most of the previous Doctors. You know, things like Matt Smith playing football or Davison playing cricket.
Yeah.
It just to me, it's placing itself in that whole continuum and sending a very strong message that this Doctor is comfortable in Lagos like the Fifth Doctor was playing cricket.
Yeah, I feel like bits like this for a Doctor, like you mentioned with Matt Smith playing football, or, you know, the Fifth Doctor playing cricket, or things like that. I think getting an impression of who the Doctor is outside fighting monsters and such, and what kind of things does he do for leisure. I think at the start of 15 with the Church on Ruby Road, when we saw him dancing in the club, for example, that was a good example of what that would be like for him, and what does he do to just exist, you know, rather than go on adventures or fight things or do this and that. But between then and now, I feel like we've had relatively little. It feels like that's kind of an area that he's lacked, where other Doctors have had a fair bit of it. Would you agree?
Joy to the World starts with a premise of just the Doctor, you know, being in his robe and zooming around, having a good time. But the thrill of adventure catch up with him.
Yep.
But yeah, it's clear that we don't have a lot of character focused, you know, more slice of lifey things on Ncuti Gatwa. But to be fair, that's thing of that whole era, you know, like it's also a problem that you can say about Ruby Sunday and a family. It's also something that you can say about Unit. It's also something that sadly you can begin to say with Belinda Chandra.
Yeah. Except
if like the finale completely reshapes things, but I just don't think so. So I don't think that it's a Doctor issue more than an era issue.
Yeah, I agree. It's like an era issue that kind of affects like all these different characters. But again, another thing from that's really nice in this episode is that the fact we meet characters who the Doctor already knows. So like Omo the Barber, for example.
Yeah.
And it's really nice whenever you get a picture of the Doctor having lived a life outside the immediate confines of one episode, or outside the confines of what you've already seen on screen. I think it's just one of those things. It's a small thing, but when the writers remember to do things like that, it just gives us more of a sense that the Doctor has a full life, is more of a full character with a history. You know, we're invited to imagine more about him. It just makes it more interesting. I just really like. I hunger for them to actually do stuff like this, like more often.
As you're saying, there's something really satisfying to see that the Doctor sometimes just taking a hose in his TARDIS and connecting it to the sink of the TARDIS or the pool, and just clears up a fire and makes a great friend.
Yeah, did you, speaking of the hose, did you read the short story by Inua Ellams where he actually basically explains the hose story, incident?
Oh, not at all.
Because basically, no, you see, the writer of this episode actually wrote a short story in prose, in text.
Yeah.
Which was posted on the Doctor Who website before the episode aired. And that basically tells the story of Omo as a child meeting the Doctor. Basically, it reveals how this fire got started, kind of what was happening. I think there was like an oil drilling facility or something, and I think and this little girl who sort of sabotages it, like sets fire to it or something, and it starts a fire, but then the Doctor is there kind of putting out the fire, floating around in his TARDIS. So it's a very sweet, kind of child-oriented kind of story. It's framed as what the child Omo wrote for like a school assignment. Like he's telling the story of what happened to him over his holidays. So, and it's very sweet and innocent like that. And I like that the author of this episode made a point of doing that, put in the effort to actually write that extra bit of story on top of this story. You know what I mean? I think it just shows you that he actually cared. He actually was actually interested to write more of the backstory to the episode.
Yeah, a lot, because I was going to say that Homo to me is a really interesting character, because to me is also a metaphor of any Doctor Who writer, you know? I don't know if you agree, if you want me to delve on it.
Go ahead, I'm interested.
Yeah, because, well, he first met the Doctor as a kid, you know? As someone that gave him strength, that saved him. But past that, his career has a more fatherly relationship to the Doctor. And also what I found really interesting is the fact that whenever the villain, that to me can also represent capitalism and exploitation, comes to force him to make stories, he has to use the Doctor unwillingly. I don't know if you see what I'm...
Yeah, that's a really interesting angle on it. The idea that he has to, because the Doctor's kind of there in his childhood, he has to sort of, the act of telling stories becomes like a, rather than a joy or like a passion, it's become like a torment, like a labor, like a tiresome, thing he has to mechanically get himself to do. And the Doctor is just like a tool to be deployed just to make ends meet at that point. Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah, to be a bit more clear, yeah, it's the fact that Homo was made by the Doctor, but also is also helping the Doctor to make who he is. And to me, the biggest giveaway, of course, I've nearly forgotten, is the fact that the Doctor alright says that his body is a barbershop. Then it's giving away the fact that we are supposed to read Homo as someone that is influencing what the Doctor is, as he is the original leader of the barbershop.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, sort of getting a haircut itself, that is an act of shaping your image and what kind of you do to your hair. Kind of the act of trusting someone else with your hair.
Yeah.
I mean, hair is it's more important than it seems, isn't it? It's part of your appearance.
Yeah, especially for black people, of course.
It kind of affects your entire day, how you feel about yourself. Just something like that. So I guess the act of the Doctor coming in, getting these haircuts, even though he says it's not for the cuts strictly, it's part of him shaping his identity by being in that community and being in that space with those people. I
like to add canon that it actually is for the cuts, because when would the Doctor have learned to, I forgot the word, to, take care of hair, or Frenchy moment.
Yeah, I guess to style his hair, or cut his hair, or dress his hair, whatever, you can use any word.
Well, yes, style. Where would he learn to style the hair of a black person, of an Afro-descendant person? In what context?
See, they say in this episode that the TARDIS does your hair.
Yeah, of course, but
I don't know where would the TARDIS have learned to do a black person's hair. We just don't know. He's never had a reason.
Oh, there's been before that, but what I meant is that he probably learned because, he had a life before he had a TARDIS, but so if he was always white, he never bothered to learn, or never had been in the situation to learn to deal with that. And to be fair, it's also a journey that a lot of black people, mostly black people that are living through primarily white environment, or in an environment that are a lot of negrophobia, that are pressured to straighten their hair, or wear wigs, or cut their hair, and they're only learning to take care of their hair when they are 30, 20, etc. So yeah, to me, even if he's too proud to speak of that, to me it's also a giveaway of the fact that he kinda realized that he has to learn how to live while being black.
Yeah, and I guess that makes the choice of a barbershop for this story a really, really fitting one. I think it's just very well chosen.
Yeah, completely.
And I love the image of the hair growing back every time they have to tell a new story. I find that really, really charming, and just a type of It's quirky, but it's quirky in a way that is so drawn from real life. Such a funny, slightly estranged version of real life, like a real connection.
Yeah.
To kind of that experience of growing up and that experience of that place. It's just a really sweet and funny image.
That's all very interesting. I love the barbershop setting. It feels like such a unique place for this. I think in general, it's like it's been 60 years. I don't think we've ever gotten a story in Nigeria. I don't think we've gotten many stories in Africa at all.
Not at all. Not one. Not a single one. It's crazy. Maybe the Crusade, but it's more like North Africa, and I'm not even sure about the Crusade. So yeah, like not one about Black Africa, that's for sure, at least. Not two. Okay, let's say not two, to be fair. Not two. It's better.
I think that's one of my favorite things with the episode is the setting. And like Gig said, it's really well realized. But I think why I love this episode so much is that some of the episodes I haven't so much liked in previous years, it feels like they're so thin and like they maybe have one idea and they might have two ideas. And that's kind of it. But this episode does what I love, where in a way, it feels like it's biting off more than it can chew a little bit. Like there are so many ideas in here. Sometimes it's kind of dizzying to try and keep up with what it's doing.
But it's done so skillfully. To me, I really don't understand the criticism about like the lack of intern coherence or anything, because to me, the episode, while having a lot of themes and things about it, is still really clear to watch and intelligible.
It's very theme driven, I think, yeah.
There may have some things that you don't fully understand, but on the whole, to me, you can completely understand that episode on the first watch without feeling like, what happened exactly? You know, like, I like to say that it's similar to Ghostwriter, but to me, Ghostwriter is harder to get into that the story in the engine. And in any cases, both are still pretty good TV that, to me, does not have a flow of coherence or of pacing. I don't know.
I think with this, kind of similarly to Ghostlight, this is a story where the writer has a really thought through world that we step into.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a case of slapping together some pre-existing Doctor Who bits and pieces that kind of feel Doctor Who-like. This is a story that could be entirely independent from Doctor Who. This could be like its own its own world, its own reality. And in a way, it partially was, because the writer, Inua Ellams, sort of partially based this on, or kind of it was inspired by a play that he wrote, the Barbershop Chronicles, which was kind of running in the theatre. And it's kind of influenced by, I guess, like the setting and world of that play a little bit. He's sort of bringing that into a more Doctor Who kind of scenario. So it's good. I think it's always good to have a writer on the show who actually writes their own things and has their own voice and has their own ideas. Because when they actually do Doctor Who, they actually bring like their own interests and passions and what drives them and what fascinates them, and they write an episode about that, and they don't just try and make it sound Doctor Who like.
Yeah, and so I really found that refreshing to watch in a fashion that really hadn't hit me since Lux, and before that, like White Blue Yonder, that feeling that just, even apart from the execution that is really, to me, near perfect, it really has novel, interesting things to make or say about the show. And it seem simple said like that, but it's not that simple. It's actually quite hard. And especially in that landscape of media and even of Doctor Who itself, let's be honest.
I think one thing that kind of sets one example of how this episode is deliberately setting itself apart. I like that it's really talky and it's mostly set in one room.
Yeah.
I like that it doesn't really revolve around kind of chases with monsters necessarily. I like pretty much any episode that revolves strictly around dialogue for the most part, and being very pacey and not very plot driven and just characters listening to each other. I like that it takes time to revel in these little stories that they're telling each other. I love the image, the screen on the wall showing the drawings of the story, bringing them to life. It invites you to actually just enjoy the passage of time within this episode and just enjoy the words, the individual bits and pieces of the story, rather than trying to kind of sprint you along on the plot or the action, so to speak.
But because, it goes back to like one of Alison Dyfer's major point about the show, or at least one element that is making the show work, is the fact that even when you have no money, you can still put two great actors in a room and write some really good sentences for them and film what's happening, And it also ties up to the fact that, as you're saying, in fact, like, I don't know if you see what is Dr. Horrible sing-along blog, But it could have been something made in the same era with the same budget and probably even less, Like the same fashion or, oh, there's a strike and we must make something and, okay, we have a barbershop, perfect. Let's film something. And bam, you have 50 minutes of TV. It's really a good script that is really flexible, but really also playing along with its strengths to the extreme. And I really love that. I really, really love that. You think you're speaking rightfully of the fact that it's not just, let's make some more Doctor Who. I love Doctor Who. Do you know Doctor Who? But still, that episode still is really embedded in Doctor Who's mythology, In Doctor Who's mythos, but also mythology or even continuity, fanon, whatever. I mean, there's a fucking scene with the Wolf Doctor. There's a scene showing all of the faces of all of the doctors. And a lot of dialogue can be taken in a more lore-tied way or serious way for the people that love giving a fuck about Rassilon or the lore of Gallifrey and to me it's also showcasing that it's not making references in itself that is the problem, it's just what is being done with them. Because it's completely logical and it really works to show all of the faces of all of the doctors. If the doctor saying that his body is a barbershop and that he lives and dies and lives and dies like the show is. So, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fugitive showing up, what they do there is that they allude to, even though it is kind of a pre-existing incarnation who, we know it's a reference to a continuity thing, in doing that, he's also adding a story for this fugitive doctor that we've never heard of before. He's just casually adding an event. So it feels like it's not overly reverent or it doesn't feel like it's boxed in by continuity. Yeah, it feels freed up to play.
And thank God.
With the continuity stuff a little bit and add stuff.
I swear if I was seeing one fucking drawing of a pre-Hartnell police box against an Nancy.
The bringing Joe Martin's Doctor back is interesting. The writers talked a lot about the idea of the Anansi daughter backstory that the episode was doing, but he said to actually have Joe Martin back that it was, quote, Russell's genius idea to bring Joe Martin back, which I completely loved because Joe's Doctor was shrouded in so much mystery. It's so gorgeous. I pray she gets another iteration, even if it's just a Christmas special or something.
Yeah.
Just seeing Joe being Joe and that fugitive Doctor, that spirit of vengeance, and there's just so much I want to know about how the Doctor becomes Joe's Doctor, and he talks a bit more about how much he loves the character. So I really like how that all folded in between Russell kind of putting that continuity element and it melding in with Inua's backstory.
Yeah, it really does. I don't even think that it's really continuity because what he was saying was basically that to him, he felt a bit wrong to make an episode celebrating the blackness of the Doctor and not at least trying to have her. And I really agree because of course, I don't know, I don't think, I don't care if Russell T Davies thinks that he was improving Shimno's depiction of the Doctor. But to me, it's the end result is that it's really improving the depiction that Shimno had of this Doctor by showing her as more part of that Doctor's history.
Yeah.
And also, in that episode, she has a clear role, and she has clearly done something in the past that has repercussions, similar to things that like the 7th Doctor could have done, or even the 11th must have sometimes, I don't remember exactly. And it's way better than the Shimno, that literally all of the Shimno episodes in which she's either an AI or a clone, and she's just helping the Doctor without having anything to say or to do about her.
Yeah, sometimes in stories with male fantasy heroes, they'll meet a woman who says, "Oh, you betrayed me in the past. Oh, I can't believe. I'm still heartbroken over what you did to me years ago." I kind of like that in this story we get the twist where actually the Doctor was a woman at the time. I kind of enjoy that. It sort of feels like undercutting the obvious sort of gendered cliche of that, of kind of like leaving a trail of heartbroken women everywhere you go. I love that it was Joe Martin's Doctor who did it that time.
But although, I'll be honest, I still have difficulty, to see that as anything else than a cool moment. But it's more tied to the fact that, to me, while Joe Martin Doctor is existing, to me it will never be, the Doctor. And not even because of not my Doctor shit, or even not even timeless shad really. It's just that I can't accept the fact that there's someone who was calling themselves the Doctor, having a blue police box before Hartnell happened in Doctor Who, let's say. And so I'm always saying it like, just like, a gaiden, like they say in Japanese. It's a term like a non-canon event, but it's not really that. It's more like an alternate event that happened on the side, or may or may not have happened, but not something that is clearly in the main continuity that we are following. And I still love that moment, but I can't, start speaking of the implication that he has about the character of the Doctor as we see it, like 99% of the time.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think mainly I enjoy that moment because I just I choose to not really think about it as like a continuity thing, like a pre-Hartnell thing. Because to be honest, I feel like we're encouraged to not even bother.
Yeah, of course.
Trying to think of it like that. They don't, like, for example, obviously, according to Chibnall Who, the fugitive Doctor and everything about her was wiped from the Doctor's mind. It's behind a blooming memory wipe thing and the division and rah. Whereas in this episode, the 15th Doctor, he seems to actually remember meeting Abena before as the fugitive.
Yeah.
So it's not quite following the rules that Chibnall set out regarding this character. It's kind of just throwing him out.
And perfect.
And saying, it's Jo Martin as fugitive Doctor. We love her. She can just be here. And you don't have to think about it too much, like the logic of it too much. Because if we're honest, the logic of it is kind of bad. So it's perfect. Yes, it's perfect that we don't have to think about the logic.
And perfect. Good riddance. I mustn't speak too much of Symbol, because I've been plenty positive on this podcast and I tend to keep at it. But yeah, like, good riddance. Like, thank God. Because it's kinda like, the thing is if all of those Chibnall plot points are just becoming, things that will never be taken seriously by anyone that is getting paid for writing for the show, like, the Valley Yard, or anything, then yeah, it's okay, have fun, make everything that you want, have the best fun of your time, and I really like that in that fashion.
Thing is, with how many multi-Doctor stories of the Doctor meeting himself that we've had in the last few years, I kind of feel shortchanged that we'll never get. We probably won't get Ncuti and Jo Martin's Doctor actually meeting each other properly. As much as obviously multi-Doctor pandering like that is actually not the best thing to do all the time, I still, a childish part of me would still love to see them actually interact.
Yeah, of course, it's always the fan-brained side that is like, oh.
Some of my favourite moments in this episode were just each time someone was telling a story during the haircut. Like, I loved each of those moments. And one of them, I thought it was really interesting when the Doctor told his story about Belinda, because that story, I felt that was like my favourite moment of Belinda so far, to be honest. I felt that story about her in the hospital felt like the bit of Belinda that like that I've been missing since her first episode almost. It feels like the kind of story you tell to actually introduce who Belinda is and what her life is like. Like, it felt kind of real from her. It felt actually drawn from the experience of nursing and being a nurse. And the reason I say that is that there's just a small tragedy in it of her offering her help, and as a result, her own life gets derailed because, the Doctor who she's given good advice to just says, okay, she's yours now. You clearly know what you're doing, so she's your responsibility. And now, as a result of that, because Belinda can't just turn around and say no, because she can't actually abandon this lady to potentially die, she has to kind of give more of herself than she is really like supposed to, according to her actual job description. So I really felt for her in there, and it was just felt like one of those small realistic tragedies from the world of work and like the world of like healthcare, and just the sincerity afterwards when the woman comes back and kind of thanks her sincerely with flowers, and just the warmth of that, and the joy of that, and the sheer simple happy ending of that. It kind of put me back in mind of times in maybe RTD1 a little bit when we get something really like genuine and sincere about the companions, like sort of home life. Like you remember like at the end of Partners in Crime when Wilf sees Donna waving out of the TARDIS and he's just so happy for her.
Yeah.
Like a shot of just pure joy like that. I feel like that's kind of become few and far between in the years since, but this was kind of something that felt a bit like that. It felt like the real warmth that I want in this era and that I want like more of, to be honest. I really liked that. It's weird that it took a different writer to kind of put that in here, but I really like that it's there.
To be honest, I wonder if those kind of scenes weren't thought by Russell, but he was too afraid, to appear as just redoing things like Partners in Crime or Smith and Jones, because I really wonder at times if he's just thinking that he can't like do that for the 5th time as an opener or something.
I see what you mean. Obviously, an opener in a hospital, yeah, has been done before, yeah, for clever reasons, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's also when I think even we are saying that Russell can only go so far. It's not even tied to skill or lack of innovation, but also the fact that even when you have really good workable ideas that will make perfect sense, you already have 5 seasons of Doctor Who behind you.
It kind of reminds me of the kind of strange beat in the first episode when the Doctor gets blasted up and down Belinda's timeline due to the time explosion, and that's how he learns all about her. And we don't really see what he learned, but I guess it's because of that he can tell this story in this episode. It's just, I think it's the fact that him learning about Belinda had to happen in this weird backwards way, like through the time plot device blast thing in Robot Revolution. I think it just kind of shows the awkward position that RTD is kind of put himself in terms of the order that we're getting Belinda and her life revealed to us. It feels a little bit front to back, if you see what I mean. Like the Doctor learning about this stuff before we do.
Yep.
So I guess speaking of ideas and how this episode sits, I guess, in the era in RTD2, so in this era, since the Disney switch over, we've had a lot of stuff about pantheons and gods. This episode does its own completely distinct version of that, doesn't it? It's interesting that from as much as season 1 and 2 have made a big point of these gods of light and music and toys and things being real and a big deal now, this episode treats the Doctor hanging out with the pre-existing pantheons of gods like Bastet and Saga as just something that's, and Dionysus, of course, as something that is completely accepted and completely normal for him. It's kind of working in its own space. It's not really concerned too much.
I don't really agree, because to me it always was clear that the Doctor was fighting with gods or hanging with gods. It's really explicit, but like even the Jiggle is speaking of how they fought the gods of Ragnarok before the Toymaker arrived. And I don't know, to me, the main differences is that the gods like Lux or the Toymaker or anything aren't from that universe, so they don't really care about what's happening to it, or they don't have a role to it, like someone as Saga, for instance. And then they aren't tied to any tradition or culture. And to me, it's what's always made the difference and what made them a lot more dangerous than the like normal gods, let's say. So to me, it really never was an inconsistency.
Okay, yeah, no, that's a good way to look at it, I think. With the whole salt at the edge of the universe, like the nature of what that allowed in, it wasn't so much the concept of gods in itself, it was just these specific kind of, I guess, alien gods, almost. Gods that are completely foreign to this universe, in contrast to the gods that we recognise from, I guess, human cultures, or I guess gods that even from other Doctor Who stories, like the Mara, Kinder, things like that.
To me, it's more that, and the fact that, it also, that the Salt and the Toymaker both made the reality more, let's say, malleable.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more of shit that people can do, and a lot more of people that can come and go. And also the toymaker has summoned his whole family, so they all have a kind of interest of just fucking around. But to me, really, the main difference is that those gods aren't tied to any notion of culture, so that makes them a whole different deal to engage with.
I think this episode is very open and outright about discussing, I guess, pantheons from human mythologies. So, like, Greek mythology or African mythology or Norse mythology, as just like I'd say more than the average Doctor Who episode. It talks about these gods, like from classical mythology, as a kind of a fixed and established part of this universe and world that the Doctor can just, interact with, talk to, and that there is a threat to this world if someone tries to get rid of them. Right? I would say that's a type, it's something that this episode is working in that most Doctor Who episodes don't. And that's part of what gives it its own voice, isn't it? I don't think...
Yeah, of course.
In most Doctor Who episodes, the Doctor isn't talking about how, like, there's, I need to go... Let me phrase this correctly. In most Doctor Who episodes, like, Dionysus isn't a plot device. Basically.
No, but it was like, it's not that as explicit as most of the time, Like, even if we know that the Doctor can do such things, he's never also saying things like that. He's with Dionysus, drinking wine drinking wine to the end of the night and flooding the city with it. He's never that explicit, let's say.
Yeah. So that's why it's nice for this episode to be a bit different.
Or even other authors of Vision can more allude to the fact that the Doctor is maybe lying or making a joke or telling us stories or making both of those all at once. And I think that the main difference is that the story of the engine is clearly saying that those guys exist and that the Doctor is nearly unequal to them or even a superior.
Oh, it's interesting. The Doctor's often such like a atheisty or secular character. He's usually very skeptical of, I think, the kind of godly presences in stories a lot of the time. I thought it was so interesting this episode to have him kind of defending, like, these gods have narrative use to humanity and, we need to keep these gods here. And he's against the villain of the episode, trying to kind of undercut that.
Yeah.
I thought that was really novel and interesting and not usually what the show does. So I was really interested, especially in this era, doing all this other stuff with the pantheon gods to get this totally kind of, this kind of different vision of how the Doctor appreciates them. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, to be honest, to me it's also calling back to the themes of Boom, in which if although the Doctor is an atheist and part of that scientific, rational UK Dawkins atheism tradition, he still acknowledges the need for religion. And, like, it's not an episode on Boom, but I even argue that at the end of Boom, he is more religious, as hell because he's basically just believing in the power that something can change on its own. And even worse, he's a bad religious or believer. He's a bad believer, because he's only believing and praying when there's no other choices and when it needs it the most. So I felt like it was really in accord with what Boom was saying about the Doctor and how he's way more conflicted about religion than one could think at once.
I think, Neo, you reference older stories where the Doctor is quite skeptical of godlike presences. I think we can all think of a story where the Doctor tells someone, you're not a god, you're just a blob or something like that. Like, I feel like Rings of Agatha might be one of those stories. He's talking to the big sun thing with a scary face and he's just sort of dissing it and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's actually consistent with this episode, because in this episode we see what an actual god would be to the Doctor compared to all those fake gods, right? These runs are actually important because they actually provide stories to humanity. They actually fulfill the role that a god would fulfill, right? In real life, they actually mean something to people. Whereas all of these other Doctor Who baddies that the Doctor encounters, often they are considered pretenders because actually they're just parasitic, like, creatures or they're evil monsters or whatever. They aren't actually born of stories. They aren't actually related to culture in any, like, real good way.
Yeah. It wasn't a criticism, but I completely agree. And also I want to go on a subject that I think is really vital and core of the episode. It's the question of generational trauma, because it's a big issue that is happening to many colored communities, black communities, of course, but even communities made of people that have gone through, wars or immigration, anything. And I find it really interesting how the villain of the episode was exploited and traumatized by other people that were declaring themselves as superior to him, and is then reproducing that structure onto other black people. And especially by taking control of their hair, which was something that is heavily embedded in slavery, in which the white people were controlling the length of the hair of black people or cutting them. And it's kind of what started the racism about hair that we have today with black people. And I think that there's already that is really interesting, but also that the episode is showing how to break that bond with the scene and the story of the breads that have helped slaves to escape. I've seen some discourse like, we don't know if that's true. I've only seen white people say that. But apart from that, if it was actually false, it would been even better, because it's showing how a story can allow people to escape the condition of the oppression. And also, something that is documented and true is that slaves were putting seeds and rations of food in the bread. They were hiding it in that to survive. And I think that is also a powerful message of the episode, the fact that you can use the material conditions of your oppression and subvert them to extract yourself of those. And it's what the bread story is about, and it's what that whole scene in which the doctor gets braided to escape happens.
So I love that moment with where the maze is in his hair. And I just really want to say there is a very special kind of our favourite word, illiteracy, in watching an episode like this, which revolves around myths and gods and legends and what stories do to people, and seeing this story about the braids that Abena tells and going, actually, fact check, Grok, that's not true, that's a myth. Why would you put a myth in this story about myths and legends? That doesn't make any sense. I thought Doctor Who was supposed to be a documentary educating us about things that actually happened. How could you? Plot hole. Yeah, there is just something really, really staggering about that.
And the worst is that we don't know if that's a myth of a real thing. It's like, I've searched that a bit and it's not entirely clear, which actually is really fitting for the thing. And I think that if Elams wanted to make something realistic, it would have taken the seeds thing, that is also a fairly known element. But the map was working way better because of its ambiguity, and it's also coming back to the myth of Ariane and
the Minotaur and Theseus. Yes.
Theseus. Yeah, thanks. And yeah, it's also a cute callback to that. And to me, it's always showing how that episode is really complete on all points. And also on the theme of generational trauma, I really love how it's depicting on the relationship between Homo and the Doctor, in which the Doctor feels exploited. Because many people are like, but why is the Doctor angry at him? It's because he was seeing Homo and his barbershop as the only safe space that he had in the whole space and time, and a situation in which he couldn't be aggressed because of his blackness. And so he reacts in a bad way to that, because he was taken by surprise. And to me, the episode is also showing that despite being traumatized, we can understand why it happened and forgive each other. And it's also what is happening to the villain of the episode at the end.
I think that moment when the Doctor feels really genuinely betrayed and genuinely angry at Omo for basically trying to use him to get himself and the other guys out of there, I think a lot of viewers of Doctor Who are kind of primed to be confused by that and react, just be puzzled by that. Because obviously, when we think of the Doctor, we think of someone who actually will often quite willingly sacrifice themselves for, the little people or the ordinary people. or will kind of put themselves out there, or is perfectly fine taking on inhuman burdens that the average mortal cannot, just to make sure everyone can go home and live safe and blah, blah, blah. But I think this is actually, the reason this is different, and I think it's good for the episode to actually strike out and actually subvert our expectations a little bit on this. It's because this is like the one place that actually the Doctor thought nothing like this could ever happen. That it feels so bizarre and jarring and upsetting for even this place to be yet another situation where he's being asked to sacrifice and be the hero and the leader and the one who takes on all the burdens. It's like that's why it's so kind of distinctly like painful to him. And, you know, and obviously not every Doctor would react like that, but not every Doctor would be able to have this story in the first place, right? I don't think it's bad for different Doctors to have their own lives and inner lives and stories and emotions and feelings.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, to be honest, like, only Jodie Whittaker could have had something similar to that, and she hadn't.
If we want to talk about the villain a bit, I was reading an interview with the writer where he said something interesting about the inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
He was asked, like, where did the idea for the Barber and everything come from? And Inua says, the seed for the villain came from something I discovered in 2020. In French, with the Francophone collapsing, erasure and colonization of the African representation within their knowledge systems, and he starts talking about the French term for ghostwriter, for someone who takes credit for your work without giving you any, being a black person. And he says that tripped me up, just flipped me. I had to look it over and over again. And there are articles about this.
Yeah, the term in question, which Nia was avoiding saying, is le nègre. Yeah.
Oh, it's worse than black person. It's worse. It's the N word. It's nègre. Yeah. It's the nègre. And I can even say that it was the case until very recently that it was considered as the official term for ghostwriter. Like, I think that it's not even been 10 years since, like, it's officially not recognized that as the primary term that one must use in French to speak of that.
So it was officially changed. Well, I mean, was there some sort of movement against it? Was there people trying to get it changed?
Not officially, but let's say that in most dictionary, and especially in French, we have something that is actually really useless and has no linguist in it, but which is the Académie Française, the French Academy, and they're kinda making takes on how French should be spoken, on what was a right to say in French or are wrong. But in fact, it's mostly people that are there for reasoning or political reasons, and there's not a single linguist or people able of doing that. And the last dictionary has been up since like decades, and they still haven't done shit since the 21st century. But still, like, I think that even them, like, said that it's not the proper term anymore. I don't think that there was protest. Maybe, I think that, but yeah, there probably must have been, because nègre is not the only thing. There's also a candy that is named like that was named like that, and I know that one did lots of polemic. So I wouldn't be surprised that that term also got out alongside the tête de nègre candy. But so yeah, the implication of that term being used alongside for black people is, I get how it can fascinate him, because it's saying so much about one of the themes of the episode, the fact that a lot of the labor of the production that black people are making is stolen, retaken, repurposed by white people. And in a lot of matters, may it be purely force of labor or art or science, it's something that is very striking, I think.
I love the idea of taking that ghostwriter figure and weaving that into the idea of like mythology. So kind of adding a figure to mythology who is the ghostwriter, who was uncredited, who was kind of betrayed for all of that. I like the idea of that as an incorporation into your standard collection of mythic characters and gods. I think the ghostwriter is kind of a unique role compared to all of those.
That's Inua puts it, after he's talked about the ghostwriter term, he says that's where he was coming up with this Barber idea. quote, a man of African descent who went around building or crafting storytelling systems and other systems for the whole world, but was constantly just slashed and removed from even the footnotes of his work. That is where I began to see the character. In West African folklore, Anansi was the holder of all stories. I thought, what if he'd done the same thing as all the other gods of storytelling? Who would lie beneath? That's where the Barber as the villain, the foil, the antagonist came from.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's such a fascinating idea for the villain he's made there. I love the whole ghostwriter gods thing. I think it's really excellent.
Yeah, I love it. I love it too.
And the fact it's a web, like just a gigantic web woven through outer space with a massive spider crawling on it. I would say that's one of those knockout images, I think, in Doctor Who. When we see kind of the huge spider crawling on the giant web for the first time, I think it is really effective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's just an image that is selling you the show, the episode, and the concept. And it is really simple and striking. It's kind of like, the ships of enlightenment.
Yeah. Yes, it's exactly like that, isn't it?
Like, yeah, it's not a ship, it's a spaceship. You're seeing a ship ride the deep space, and you don't need anything more. And same, like, you're seeing a spider web on the universe, and it's evocating so much things that it's already really good. Really, really good. And I'm seeing enlightenment, but even other things like, I don't know, the Beast Below, for instance.
I think there are quite a few moments like that in Doctor Who where you're inside a room or a building and then you realise that actually you're in space in something you didn't expect. So Mummy on the Orient Express is another one when it shows that they're in space for the first time. Or like, there's the inverse of that in Dark Water where they reveal that we're actually just in the middle of London when we think we're in outer space. But it's one of those things where the jarringness of what is outside the door is something utterly unexpected. I guess it's a Doctor Who trademark, and this is a very, very good example of it.
Yeah, completely.
With the Barber, I really liked at the end that, the Doctor's making his case for what he's doing being wrong and this all being a bad idea and everything. And it kind of rarely for a villain, he does actually kind of listen. And then we kind of get this more positive ending where there's forgiveness and, a handshake and the Doctor helping the Barber up. And he's kind of unvilified at the end. We don't really have these deaths at the end or anything. Everyone kind of moves on positively. I think that's pretty rare for these sorts of stories. And I really found that quite powerful. Omo showing, the kindness that wasn't necessarily deserved with the Barber and everything, and everyone like actually listening to each other. I really liked that. I thought that was quite interesting. Yeah,
I really appreciated having one of those slow, quite gentle endings at the end of the episode where everyone says goodbye to each other and resolves their differences. I love the shot of the Barber just gently waving to Abena as she leaves, and there's kind of a sound cue happening at that. I think just the ambience of that scene, the feeling of all of that, I think it's really effective and really nice and very different for Doctor Who, which is usually just racing to get out of there once the plot is finished. I would think the emotional arc of the Barber is kind of one of the most important things in the episode, and I find myself sort of over the course of the episode feeling like I wish it was even more like fleshed out than it is, because I feel like at certain moments, like so when, for example, when he's boasting that he is all of these story lords from throughout history, and then he's casually debunked by the Doctor, and then he reveals the truth because he's very shaken by having been exposed, and he tells us his real story, and then once he's told us that, we also go fairly quickly to him revealing his true motive, which is not just to go and take the throne, but to actually, remove all of the other gods from history as well. And then we also go from him doing that to him being persuaded to give up by the Doctor fairly quickly as well. It's one of those things where people say this about so many Doctor Who episodes, and I often think it's really stupid, but in this case I would have actually loved a much longer version of this story.
Yeah.
Just so every beat had even more time, just so we could slow down even more. I mean, I love the slow moments and talky moments in this story. I love that, I love that it has time to just think and dwell on stuff, and so I want to take the good things about this and give them more room to expand even more and bloom even more. You see what I mean?
Yep.
Like for example, when the moment that he reveals that his plan is actually to commit murder, godicide, or however you'd call it, I think he basically he reveals that because the Doctor is just yelling at him to tell me, reveal it. So I think that's just an example of something that it feels a little bit like we need to get to the next bit of the story. And again, I just think the Barber is such a cool character and performance. I would have loved more, just a bit more back and forth interaction, I think, to tease and get that story, just to let that story unfold in a more sort of nuanced way.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, also I wonder if it's not the problem is that you can't put that much in 50 minutes. I don't know. Which also, but is also a concern that many have with Doctor Who these days, that is the show just too short by now? Or is the structure has to be rethought from the ground up?
What do you guys think about the advice that Belinda gives to Abena there? When she comes over and tells Abena that... Well, Belinda has just learnt that Abena feels very betrayed by her father, and that also that obviously the Barber plans to kill the gods, kill Anansi, and is framing this as a vengeance for her. And Belinda comes over to Abena and she says, hurt people. What matters is what you do with that pain.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of persuades Abena, yeah. And then kind of Abena brings it up again at the end. Wow, hurt people. It's not often a mortal gives a god good advice. I feel part of this is that Belinda's role in this episode is a little bit... with the exception of that nursing story, which I love, I feel like her actual dialogue throughout the main bit of the episode is quite similar to what most companions would get in her role. It doesn't feel very specific to her.
Well, yeah.
And that thing about hurt people, specifically, I don't know, it didn't entirely work for me because it feels a little bit too Instagram quip, someone's found the way to phrase what's to be honest, it's not a particularly novel or insightful bit of advice, really. It's the most obvious bit of sort of therapy speak imaginable. I kind of found framing it like that, like there's something that even a god had never heard something that powerful before. I wasn't entirely sold on that, to be honest with you.
I think that it's not really about the novelty of it, but the fact that of being reminded of it, and that it can also happen to your father or anyone. And also, I feel like it's not too bad to go in that, I know writers will use subtext and they're all cowards, when I see a lot of people having trouble to grapple that theme of trauma and what people are doing with that.
Yeah. What did you guys think of, I guess, Ncuti in this episode? Because I think a lot of this episode, a lot of the big moments where we need to follow what's happening, I think he gets the job of kind of establishing the stakes. So at the end, when he's trying to really passionately convince the Barber not to go ahead with his plan of killing all the gods, he has to basically explain to us just purely through his dialogue that how bad it would be if this happened. 7 billion lives would be wrecked. How would they pass on tradition? How would they do all of that? So he has a pretty big job in this episode. So, what did you think what did you think of it overall? Because I think there are certain moments in this episode that I really like. When he when he kind of plays with accents a little bit. Don't be scared. We will leave here. That felt like one of the biggest moments when he's actually having fun with the role of the Doctor, to be honest. And I feel like it's feel like one of those. I feel like there aren't that many moments a bit quite like that. Because I feel like a lot of the time he is fun, he's saying Yas Queen, or he's kind of grinning and being funny. But I think a moment like that where he actually takes a line and does something that is completely unexpected with it, and is very, very playful with it, and actually he doesn't sound the way he usually sounds, I really appreciated that. I felt that was a bit unique, for his performance. I
agree, but at the same time, I feel like Ncuti has plenty of those moments. You just spoke of Yas Queen, and to be fair, he's doing a whole high kick while saying that. And to me, it's clear that he's genuinely having a lot of fun while saying that, and that it wasn't written that he has to raise his leg above his head while saying that line. I must admit that to me, maybe that it feels a bit less spontaneous as a modus operandi, but I really haven't felt that lack of scenes, especially in that season, to be fair.
I think in the third act of this episode, where as the stakes kind of heighten up and get more and more dramatic and things get louder and more intense, I think his performance, he starts to, you can feel how much physical effort he's putting in.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it gets maybe a little bit too consistent, because just the way he's kind of enunciating all of these lines, how would they pass on tradition? You knew about this plan. All of them inside, telling stories, bickering. I will not fail them. You were once mortal. Their lives and their stories will end because of you. I kind of feel, yeah, maybe it's just like a thing with me. Maybe I'm too attuned to this stuff from like doing acting at university. But like, I kind of feel like watching that, I kind of feel like it's almost too consistent a little bit, because it starts to feel, you can kind of feel his exhaustion kind of, I think, transfers to the viewer a little bit. Like, maybe not everyone, certainly to me. I kind of find myself feeling like there needs to be a bit more like variation of like tone and just finding a way through these lines that is like a little more varied. Because I feel like, to be honest, because it's very easy to exhaust the listener when you're speaking. I think, and because this is something I've had to like think about a lot, because I do these kind of speeches like of Shakespeare and stuff, and I'm always constantly getting direction, like don't do repeated like stresses like that too much. Don't hit everything with a massive hammer like all the time. You have to slink through lines like a snake sometimes, and use dynamics like in a piece of jazz music almost. So I kind of feel like in the third act of this episode, and maybe one reason that some people might not enjoy it as much as others, I think this episode has been kind of polarizing. I think one reason is maybe I think the tone and like the performances in the third act is a little bit, it's extremely loud. It's like Murray Gold doing bombastic music but in acting form. A little bit.
Yeah, I can get that criticism of vision, but it just hasn't struck me, to be honest.
What did you guys think of Captain Poppy appearing to Belinda really, really randomly in the street? I had to check it was actually her, and it is. Like, it's the same kid from Space Babies.
Yes, it is. In the way in which the scene is shot and composed, I wonder if it's not alluding to, some myth or folklore or story that I just don't know, because I am Caribbean and not African, and I sadly don't have a lot of knowledge about the myth and folklore that there can be in Nigeria. But I wouldn't be surprised at all that there's still some thought behind how the shot was made. But it seems that it's mostly like just a kind of foreshadowing, I don't know, Divani messed with time and things are all fucked up, I don't know.
To be honest, I like that even if it is just mindless teasing of the finale, it still feels in tune with this episode, with the strange and surreal vibe of it. Like, I feel like I can ignore that it's a teaser for the finale, because it's kind of cool and interesting and creepy. Again, for an episode that's celebrating the Doctor's blackness, to have like yet another black character from Doctor Who, even if it is a baby appearing, kind of it feels in keeping.
But I bet that there's something else, because I find the shot way too elegant and made with some dedication to only be, just random foreshadowing. I mean, it probably is, but I can't think that there's only just this to it.
What did we think of the climax where the Doctor overloads the engine with like the clip show of his different regenerations and episodes?
I liked it more on the second watch than on the first, because I think I misinterpreted it the first time a little bit, to be honest. I think it's because of what we've seen in recent years with Doctor Who, like with, say, The Timeless Children, when she's like, have a blast of this, Matrix, and we get a big montage of like Silurians and Zygons and like all the doctors flicking past and then the Morbius doctors. I think stuff like that has become so, I've gotten so used to it, seeing all these archive clips like flung at the viewer, that when I watched this, I kind of felt like it was just another one of them. And maybe the choices of clips that they used maybe kind of also steered me in that direction. But there is a bit of a difference with this one, because the point that the Doctor is making is not just look at how many Doctor Who adventures I've been on, look at how many back episodes we have on iPlayer here. That what he says, like, is specifically, I have other people inside me, right? These past versions of me, like my body is the barbershop, like these past lives that I have led, like they're all still inside me. Like it's about the people that he's been, less so than it is all the TV that has been made and that you can watch. So I think in what it actually is in practice, from a story perspective, it's not just the usual advertisement of your lore and your wiki references and stuff. I think it can feel that way because they're showing all the faces of the Doctor on the screen, but I think it is like a little bit different as a story, so I appreciated it more like on the second go round.
Yeah,
but I can also see why someone would feel a bit sick of like showing clips from past Doctor Who as like the resolution to the episode.
Oh, I get it, but to me it's really clearly about what is happening when he's speaking of being a barbershop just 2 sentences before that. Like, to me, it's really not like an unheard Dr. Clipshow moment. And also, it made me think heavily of Louise Labé well-known poem, I Live, I Die. And its first phrase, which is really well-known, which is I live, I die, I burn and drown myself. And again, I may think that I would be wishing in other situation, but I genuinely believe that someone that seems as versed and cultured as Elams probably has thought of that. And I'm not even saying that it has some deep meaning, etc., but just that it adds in to the whole atmosphere of this episode, of that whole myth world, story world of this episode.
I really like the idea that his story just being 6 words, I'm born, I die, I'm born, just in those 6 words, because obviously the nature of it is that he does reincarnate, in just a few words, you have a story that is effectively infinite, and because it's true, that is effectively a never-ending story, like an infinite source of power.
Yeah.
Packed into a few words. It reminded me a little bit of, do you remember the Rings of Agatha, when Clara
Yes.
basically defeats the god in that episode by saying, well, all the possible stories represented by, this leaf, that my mum could have lived, had she, survived, that is effectively infinite stories, infinite meaning, and that will blow you up, basically. That shorts out the big, scary kind of plot thing. It's a bit like that, and I like the elegance of being able to convey infiniteness in just a handful of words, like a very small thing actually having an infinite thing within it. Like it's one of those cool kind of high concepts.
Yes, I completely agree.
And the production design, actually, with the whole interior of the shop, when they're running through the maze and the camera goes up and we see like above the maze, like one of those top-down sort of video games. I love that shot. Kind of there's something a bit like that in one of the John Wick films, actually.
Yeah.
I really love that shot. And when we go in, we see the giant tree brain thing. That looked amazing. The design of that thing was absolutely fantastic. Like real shout out. I think the production designers knocked it out of the park for most of the episodes in RTD2, to be honest. But this was actually a highlight. That tree, heart, brain.
Yeah, it made me think like of a weird thing that you would see in a Disco Elysium dream. That's really cute. Really cute.
Yeah. yes.
And also, it's again really self-explanatory, but striking about what stories are made of.
Yeah, like a heart inside, a beating heart inside a brain. It's kind of like a metaphor for, I guess, like what sort of a story is, or kind of something that is alive, but it's also a thing of intellect and of imagination. Yeah, it's very, very, very cool.
Yeah, that's so lovely. Very, very lovely.
I kind of wonder, because maybe the whiteness of this fandom and of the show in general, I do wonder if is there like some trepidation that fans maybe have when responding to this episode? Because sometimes I feel like some of the praise that kind of like people give to it kind of feels like people are a bit nervous to talk about it. I don't know. It feels like there's an awkwardness with it, or like almost like a patronizingness with it. Like I feel like some fans like didn't really like it, but they've got to say I feel forced to say I liked it, and they're just like doing it in this like weird sort of weirdly patronizing way. I think it's just important to be able to talk about it like openly, like we're doing.
Yeah, completely, and of both sides, to be honest, because I feel like there's a lot of edginess to say that that episode. That you don't get that episode, or that it was, unclear, and just a basic laugh of interest into topics or themes that you may not understand or not know, and that you have to engage with. It's really basic issues.
Yeah, disinterest can be, it can have like a knife in it sometimes. I think like there's such a thing as sort of motivated disinterest, or like disinterest that isn't entirely innocent. I don't know, I feel like it can be callous. People's attitudes to stories that kind of aren't really about them can be a bit like flippant and dismissive and callous and cruel sometimes.
Yeah, completely. It's the thing that Charles Mills made on white ignorance. How ignorance is a key part of white supremacy, and how it is clearly used to basically ignore the issues or the lives of non-white people. It's Charles Mills who is explaining a lot of things about that in his racial contract book.
I would say I really like that this episode doesn't feel the need to, I guess, pander to people who are disinterested in it at all. Like it's absolutely unbothered. It doesn't care whether or not you care.
Yeah, thank God.
Yeah, I think when the tried and true and expected and cliche things within Doctor Who can get so wearisome, it's nice to have an episode that feels in a completely different universe from all of that, which this does.
Yes, refreshing is the term.
Yeah, this doesn't feel like it's part of the same old Pete McTighe kind of like centrism, both sides, blah 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 blah, and all the weirdly political kind of debates going on there. It's nice that this episode just has its own thing, and it doesn't feel whiny in the way that some episodes do. It's just telling its own story in a very like compassionate way.
Yep. It's a really beaming episode with a lot of life and things to do and say, and that's just really cool. Because I haven't like spoken a lot sometimes, but I really don't have much to say apart that I really love that episode. That is really pleasing and satisfying to know that, and to be reminded that Doctor Who is doing things like that on a basis, and that it may sometimes be once per season, but it always be once per season, and nothing else can deliver things like that. And I don't know, it's just, to me it was also a good reminder alongside Docs of why I love that kids show so much.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think it's very easy to get disillusioned with, why have I been watching this show for so many years? Why am I still watching it as I approach my 30s? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but, sometimes you do get episodes that, oh, right, yeah, like it can still happen when, like, there's some sort of spark of something completely different and something that you can't get anywhere else. Really, like, where's the mass of storytelling like this exactly on TV or anywhere? Like, it's not really there, is it? It's just so yeah. I love that they took a huge risk, they took a huge swing, and they made an episode that's completely unique.
That wraps up our chat on the story and the engine. What did you think of this episode? New writer, new sort of world for the show. How did it play out for you? Let us know what you think. Thank you very much for listening.